Fascinating stuff here. A lot of you folks, if you're an Alabama fan, you always have your eye on Bama, but you also watch the state of Florida. You get a lot of talent from there, and pretty much everyone knows. If you're a South Carolina fan, a Clemson fan, an Ohio State fan, yeah, you want to recruit the state, and to be successful, you probably need to, in most cases, recruit the state. But you also know in the back of your mind, hey, if Miami or Florida State or University of Florida ever really fully harness the in-state talent there, they're going to be a handful to deal with, not only on the recruiting trail, but eventually on the football field for us come playoff time or maybe down here conference championship time. So our Bud Elliott the other day put out the first of several regional and in some cases hyper-focused on state scorecards. They called it the Sunshine State Scorecard. And the methodology here essentially is, let's take all the 4- and 5-star talent in a state, in this case the state of Florida, let's just see where they've been going. Not last year, and not just over the past few years, but let's back it up way over a decade, and let's split things into 3- and 4-year increments so we see some solid data and solid trends there. Is the state being rated by someone? Are most kids staying in state? Are most kids going out of state? If they're staying in state, is there one program that's disproportionately taking advantage of the always massive crop of in-state talent that they have there? There were some trends that were very noticeable, and I don't think any of these trends are going to surprise anyone who has paid attention to this sport in or out of that state over the past decade. The last 3 classes in the state of Florida, more than 50% of your 4- and 5-star kids have left the state. Here is where the story is really told. So again, Bud Elliott did this. I have linked this piece in the show notes below if you want to check it out, ideally after the show, but if you want to check it out, do so. And I would encourage you, when you're looking at this and you look through the methodology, look at the 4-year rolling averages, because anything could happen in any given year. But from 05 to 08, keep in mind this is an Urban Meyer University of Florida team, 05 to 08, 60% of those 4- and 5-star kids, elite kids, they stayed in state. From 09 to 2012, that number drops to 52%. From 13 to 16, that number drops to 47%. And from 2017 to 2020, it's still at 47%. If you want to zoom in further on just top 100 players, so really high 4-star to 5-star kids, 05 to 08, which is over a decade ago now, 66% of the top 100 rated players in Florida were staying in state. Fast forward to today and the last 4 years, 44%. So that number's dropped off pretty precipitously, and I skipped the in-between because the general trend was the same as when I read you the previous stat. Here's what I think about all this. Okay, I didn't just read any trend that's probably shocking to anyone who follows recruiting or lives in this state or just follows college football. The University of Florida, there's a reason we're showing you a lot of Gators B-roll right now. The University of Florida has to pounce on this. The last couple of times that 2 programs were struggling in the state of Florida, someone pounced on it. If you think back, I already mentioned Urban Meyer, if you think back to when Meyer first got to Florida, and you remember what the situation was at Miami, you had Larry Coker still there. And you remember Bobby Bowden was in his latter years, and Florida State was no longer recruiting at the level that they once did. Urban Meyer in Florida took advantage of it. In fact, I would argue on the field and on the recruiting trail, Urban Meyer set a different tone that still has lasting implications in this conference, in the SEC, that can be seen. So in a lot of ways, Meyer came in and revolutionized the way that things were done in the SEC. Saban, of course, took that ball and ran with it when he got to Alabama. But the bottom line is, when 2 were down, 1 was up there. And then you only have to hit the fast forward button a few years, and all of a sudden you look in that 2011, 12, 13 range, and all of a sudden it's out with Urban Meyer at Florida. Will Muschamp comes in. And then you've got Randy Shannon, I believe it was, Colin. Yeah, it was Randy Shannon down at Miami. And all of a sudden, Jimbo Fisher starts stacking top 5 classes on top of each other. They end up winning a national championship there. Results notwithstanding, just in the term of recruiting alone, when 2 have been down, someone's taken advantage. So right now, what do we have at Miami? There's a lot of hope. A lot of people could sell you on a vision of how things will improve. But to this point, they haven't improved. And Miami has been a mess in any one of these 4-year stretches. They've been a mess in one or two, at least, of every one of these stretches. At least 1 or 2 years in every one of these stretches. So Miami is what they are right now. Florida State set themselves back a good ways by making, by all accounts now, a pretty disastrous hire in Willie Taggart. Mike Norvell comes in. They think they have a good recruiting staff put in place down there. They think that there are some positive early returns, but you know, that's what you, just to be honest with you, that's what you hear every time a new staff is in place. No one ever puts together a new staff and says, well, I mean, we're going to be all right coaching, but kind of suck in recruiting. I don't really even think we're going to try to recruit all that hard. So everybody has that tone when they first put together a staff. But Dan Mullen's been there a couple of years now at Florida. And here was the knock on Dan Mullen. When he first walked in the door, you couldn't find anyone worth their salt that was going to question that man's acumen as a football coach, as a play caller, as a developer at the quarterback position, as a teacher of the game. No one doubted him. Here's what everyone whispered behind the scenes. Everyone whispered, this dude has not put together a coaching staff that's going to be able to out-recruit Georgia, and he's not put together a coaching staff that's going to be able to dominate the state of Florida. Thus far, they really haven't done either of those. They've been competitive, but they haven't done either of those. So this is where it gets really interesting, because I think that this is Florida's time. There's going to be a time for them. Recruiting, which leads to good players in your program, which if you can develop them, leads to championship contention on the field. This is Florida's time. And so here's where it gets really fun. So I'm looking at our current 24/7 Sports team rankings. And if you'll look ahead to the 2021 class, and again, we're working off the assumption that this sport will go on eventually, despite what's happening in elsewhere, just other corners of the world. You look right now at those team rankings, Mullen's got Florida in the top 5. Now, the detractors would say, yeah, but look at their player average. Everyone else at 95, 94, 95, 93, and Florida's down at 90. So some people will tell you, oh, maybe there's a little fool's gold there. Right now, it's March. So I can field both sides of that equation, and I can easily understand why you'd say either. I'm just telling you, they're sitting top 5 right now. It's not a bad place to be. Here's where it gets fun. Where it gets fun is when you look at the kids that they're in it for right now. Jason Marshall's a 5-star DB out of Miami. If you had to nail me down, I'd lean Florida for him right now. Leonard Taylor, 5-star defensive tackle out of Miami. I'd lean Florida for him. Amari Harvey, that's 4-star safety out of Tallahassee. I'd lean Florida for him. Marcus Burke, 4-star wide receiver out of Jacksonville. That kid recently named Florida his leader. So I'm not a recruiting expert, nor do I claim to be. I happen to know a few of them, and I do follow recruiting pretty closely. I think Florida has reason to feel good about a lot of in-state elite kids right now. Now that C word enters the equation, and that is closing. And I don't really even like to throw around the term closing when it's March and you got a long way to go until signing day. And hey, for all we know, the recruiting calendar is about to be turned upside down and redefined for this cycle to begin with. So who knows how it's going to work out. But you talk to people behind the scenes, if we just zoom out 50,000 feet here, and the same people who doubted the ability of Dan Mullen's staff to get it done on the recruiting trail when he first walked in the door, those same people now, when I talk to them, they say, they're still not what I would call elite, but they're a far cry for the better from what they were when he first got there. And here's specifically what they talk about. Everyone wants to look at the position coaches, and obviously they're very important. Those are the guys who go out on the road. Those are the guys who are in the living rooms. Those are the guys who ultimately are listed as the official recruiter for a kid. But it's really important to have an army of support staff and quality control folks in-house to do a lot of the dirty work behind the scenes that you don't necessarily see. It's just on signing day, their efforts come to fruition in the form of a top 5 class instead of a top 15 class. And if you don't think it makes a difference, check out who finishes top 5 every year and check out who floats 10 to 15 every year and ask yourself, what's one group doing that the other group is not necessarily doing? I think I've been pretty clear there. The hidden key here is continuing to beef up their staff. You know, this last cycle, we were sitting here again in this very studio on National Signing Day. And Florida misses out on Tim Williams. You know, that's the big defensive tackle that stayed committed to Alabama. I kind of viewed him as a litmus test for this last National Signing Day, but just as they lost out on him, Xavier Henderson was a guy, big-time wide receiver, top 100 kid, top 70 kid out of the state of Florida. it was them and Clemson, and maybe in past years they don't land him. There's no real way to know that. All I'm saying is right now it's a very important time. It's a very big pivot time for Florida. They're doing good. There's no area they're bad in. They're good on the field. They're competitive on the field. Their results have been very good. The recruiting has been very good. They're not like USC. I mean, they're finishing top 10, I think, in this last cycle they were. It's not that. It's all relative to who they have to beat. We all know it. You don't even need to speak the names in this room. We know who they have to beat. And to do that, they're good right now in an arena where they have to be great. They're a lot closer to being great than they were 2 or 3 years ago, but they're not there yet. And so that to me has got to be the emphasis, priority 1A in Gainesville. Continue to upgrade that staff, because that's how you upgrade recruiting, which is how you upgrade the product on the field, which is how you go from sort of a dark horse, maybe if so-and-so encounters a lot of injuries, you could slip in there to, hey, it's Florida this year in the East, and it's Georgia in the East, and whoever comes out of the East is going to go toe-to-toe with whoever comes out of the West. And, hey, this conference may have 2 playoff teams again. Florida certainly could be one of them. We don't talk that way about Florida yet. We could in the not-too-distant future if they do capitalize on the opportunity that they have right now.